Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your cybersecurity series. My name is Vlad, and I'm here to help you and support you in your cybersecurity journey, even if perhaps you don't have a technical background. Today is episode 22, and we are continuing our series on cryptography. What we discussed last time was really focusing on the Spartans, so 500 years before Christ, and what we talked about was how they used to roll ribbons, so pieces of parchment, around a skitali, so that device that we talked about, in order to compose hidden messages. But the thing is that it was not really encryption. It was really more about encoding the message by mixing the letters through techniques of transpositions and permutations, as we discussed. Today, we will really focus on cryptography, and we will talk more about this concept of cryptographic key. For that, I will give you two examples. We'll talk about Julius Caesar on the left and also Blaise de Vigenère on the right. So, starting with Julius Caesar, so famous, of course, general. I'm sure you've heard about him. Also, a strategist, a tactician, a Roman emperor, born 100 years before Christ. And the thing is that he really promoted cryptographic techniques among his generals, among the different armies. And that was done also during the Gaul campaign, so the Gaul Wars, at the time where Julius Caesar was trying to conquer what is today France. So approximately 50 years before Christ. And the idea that Julius Caesar used, and so did his armies, was really to encrypt a secret message by incrementing the letters in the alphabet. So what we will talk about today really relies on the fact that you are using an alphabet with letters that are in a certain order. So like the modern alphabet today, like whether you're speaking in English, in French, in German, could also be in Russian with the Cyrillic alphabet or even in Arabic. However, this does not really apply to phonemes or if you are using, let's say, icons, just like in certain Asian languages. So if you are using katakanas or pictograms, it's not really going to be applicable. However, here we are going to consider just the Latin alphabet, the traditional one. So the idea is the following. You have a plain text message, for example, attack west, that you want to convey to some of your troops or some of your generals. You are going to increment every letter in your message. And the idea is that Caesar did it 3 times in a row. So the letter A is going to become a letter B, and then a letter C, and then a letter D. And you do that on all the letters by following the alphabet. If you arrive at some point at the letter Z, of course, you roll back to the beginning of the alphabet. So the Z is going to become an A, and then a B, and then a C, etc. So for example, here, our plain text message, which is attack west, is going to become D, W, W, D, F, N, Z, H, V, W. And you can see that the message is no longer recognizable. And that's really the difference with the Spartans that we discussed in the previous episode. Here, even if you mix the letters, you're not going to be able to easily recompose the secret message. The other way around, if you are presented with a ciphertext, the idea is the same. You are going to do what we call rotations, where you're going to increment the letters. So the letter Y is going to become a Z or A and then a B, etc. So here we have rotated 3 times in the alphabet. However, as we can see, we still don't have anything readable. And the idea is that you can keep going. After all, there are only 26 different possibilities, but you keep doing that until you find a readable message. So here in this example, my ciphertext was just leave a comment. So that was the secret message. You are free to do so if you want to. But the idea is that we are doing 13 rotations. That's something that is still being used today in certain algorithms. Why 13? It's basically taking the mirror letter within the alphabet. So it's switching by half of the alphabet and moving all the characters. So as you see, it's quite easily. If you are presented with the Caesar cipher, there are a couple of ideas on how to break it. So the first one would be brute force, meaning trying all 26 combinations possible. This is something that you can still do by hand, or there are famous websites that allow you to type some text and will propose you the 26 different phrases or paragraphs. Or if you also want to, you can apply what we call frequency analysis. And the idea is that in a given language, for example, here in French, some of the letters they don't have the same frequency of appearance. So in French, sorry, the letter A appears approximately 9% of the time out of all the letters in the alphabet. The W is never present. We don't have a lot of words with the letter W, except perhaps one or two. But of course, that would be very different from the English language, where the W letter is really popular and represents a higher proportion of the letters, of course. So that's also a way to give a hint to how many increments were done when encrypting the message, and you can break, let's say, the cipher even faster. When we talked about the cryptographic key in my previous example, the cryptographic key is really the number of times that we are doing the rotation. So here, 13 and 3 in my previous example. So Julius Caesar was really known to do it 3 times, but you could do it as many times as you want. If we push it even further, so Caesar was 100 years before Christ. Now we are going to do a fast forward to the 16th century. So we are in the years 1523. So that's the birth of Blaise de Vigenère. And he, let's say, invented, but not only he invented himself, he worked with a lot of peers. And they had, let's say, the Vigenère Cipher has been known or let's say, derived from his name and from his work. However, we now know today that it was not only Blaise de Vigenère who invented the Vigenère Cipher. His work and what should have been perhaps called the Palazzo cipher actually came from an Italian also cryptologist who was working around the same time as Blaise de Vigenère. So both of them, so Blaise being French or Giovan being Italian, both of them came up with approximately the same techniques. Both of them published around the end of the 1500s. So Blaise de Vigenère published his work in 1586, and Giovan Battista Bellazzo published his work a bit earlier, 20 years earlier. But anyway, what I want you to remember is that the concept is quite similar, even though they had some slight differences that we will not go through today. So the idea is that we have, as usual, a plain text, a secret message that we want to convey or to send to our emissaries or the different troops or just some friends that we want to chat with. Here I took the example of "Long live the king." And the idea is that we are going to choose a secret keyword, and that keyword can be anything. Here, of course, just to be, let's say, consistent with the theme, I chose England. So this keyword England, we are going to derive it into a number of increments. So the letter E being the fifth in the alphabet, at least the Latin alphabet, we are going to use the number 5 as an increment. The letter N is in 14th position, so we are going to use the 14 increments, G, L, A, N, D, etc., and so on and so forth. And the idea is that we are going to apply this increment to our message. So when we say "Long live the king," the first L is going to be incremented 5 times in the alphabet. So L, M, N, O, P. So 5 positions from the L, we get the letter P. Same with the letter O, which will give us 14. If we do 14 increments, we will get the letter B. If we take the letter N and do 7 increments, we are going to get the letter T. So we do it like that. And of course, we don't stop there because our message, our plain text message, is even bigger than that. So the idea is we repeat the same key. So we slide the word England as much as we can until our plain text is completely covered. So as you can see here in blue, I repeated the word England, which gives us the same increment, meaning that in the end, the letter E, for example, is going to be encoded or encrypted, in a letter I. And in the end, we are presented with a ciphertext, which is P, B, T, R, etc., etc. What you can notice is that, and that's the main difference with Caesar Cipher, the same letter will not necessarily be encoded in or encrypted into the same letter as well. Here we have "Long live the king," so we have 2 L's at the beginning of "long" and at the beginning of "live." Those 2 character L's are not going to be encrypted into the same character. One of them is going to be encrypted into a P because the increment was 5, but the other one is going to stay an L because there was no increment. Or increment of 1 just means that you are taking the same character. So as you can see, you can have two letters that are different in the ciphertext but should be the same in the plain text. So that's already bringing more complexity, and sometimes the letters are not even modified. That's my example here. The opposite is also true in the ciphertext. If you have for example, here the character P, this character might correspond to two different letters in the plain text. So it's much more difficult in terms of analysis. Even if you intercept a ciphertext, breaking it in order to find the plain text is going to be much more difficult. How hard is it to break, you might be wondering. The idea is that this cipher was even considered secure for many centuries. So that's also one of the beautiful things about cryptography. Some of the techniques that were invented, even sometimes for centuries, lasted in times for a very long time until basically we had some modern calculations methods, or even today with computers. But that one stayed secure for many centuries. It was broken by two people, Charles Babbage and Friedrich Wilhelm Kaczynski. So they had to wait 300 years approximately to finally break the Vigenère Cipher. How did they do it? Basically, they were looking for certain patterns, because even if, or should I say, in the case of a large text, so for example, pages and pages of document, if your key is small, like 8 characters, like the word England that we used previously, at some point, or 8 or 7, yeah, 7, sorry, 7 characters in the word England. The thing is that at some point you will repeat some of the patterns. So you will find small letters like I do in English, so I do. So those combination of 3 letters, statistically speaking, at some point when you put the word England on top of it, there will come a time where I do is always mapped to the same letters of the word England, meaning that you will have some repetitions within your ciphertext, and that can already give you some idea on the size of the key. And once you have that, you can try to break with certain increments. You can do some frequency analysis as well, as we discussed on Caesar Cipher, but this time you do it on subsets. So for example, you take all the first letters and then all the second letters, and you try to understand what could be the increment. There could be also advanced variations, because even if the basic Vigenère Cipher was broken 300 years after that, you can even get more complex into the encryption methods. So the idea here is that, for example, instead of using the same encryption key, so England, we can also encrypt our encryption key and slide it over. So we can increment, for example, by 1. So England is going to become FOHMBOE. And instead of incrementing by 5, 14, 7, 12, 1, 14, and 4, we are going to increment by 6, 15, 8, 13, etc., etc. Meaning that this time it's even harder to identify the key because there is no repetition, and the frequency analysis is going to be completely biased, in the sense that it's going to be hard to identify a 7-letter cryptographic key. That was just to give you a short example. And this concept of incrementing and deriving the key is something that is being used today, even in some of the Wi-Fi routers that you might be using at home. There used to be a weak protocol called WEP, so WEP. WEP was broken down, especially because it was using increments into the cryptographic key that it was sharing. More on that, of course, when we arrive at the modern era of cryptography, but that's just to give you some ideas of how you can, let's say, make a cryptographic algorithm even more complex and hide certain messages. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and see you soon in the next video.